floods, roads that fall apart, and earthquakes. The show you just finished shooting is called Alaska: The Last Frontier. Tell us about it. Alaska's Jane Kilcher. It has been hard for The Last Frontier to work in the harsh Alaskan desert. Fans were shocked and didn't know what to think when she suddenly split up with Kilcher. Up until now, no one knew the real reasons. Would you like to know the truth? Join us as we find out Jane's trials and story that hasn't been told. What you need to know about Alaska, also known as the Last Frontier. It's important to know what kind of family Jane joined before we talk about what happened to her. Alaska. The Last Frontier is an American reality TV show that aired on the Discovery Channel from December 29, 2011 to November 13, 2013. It fascinated viewers for more than a decade. 2022. The show was a rare and interesting look into the lives of the Kilcher family, who live off the land in Alaska's rough wilderness and are strong and independent. The Kilcher family is descended from Yule and Ruth Kilcher, who came to Alaska from Switzerland and started their own farm more than 80 years ago. The farm has been passed down through the generations and is about 11 miles outside of the town of Homer. Becoming more than just a place to live, it's also a way of life that is based on custom and survival. In contrast to many modern families, the Kilchers have decided to live in a way that doesn't use many of the modern world's conveniences. They don't have modern heaters, so they have to rely on their own skills to get by. Their daily lives are based around hunting, fishing, farming, and being careful to get ready for Alaska's harsh winters. Jewel Kilcher is a singer-songwriter who is famous all over the world and is a member of the Kilcher family. One of the main characters on the show, Kilcher, is Jewel's father, which makes the family story even more interesting. Jewel talks about how the show found out about her family. Jewel has been on the show talking about getting back in touch with her roots and spending time with her family in the Alaskan woods. Aside from Jewel, Jane, Adsley's wife, is another woman who captivated the crowd. Now let's talk about the things about her that made people like her. More about Jane Kilcher. There was more to Jane Kilcher than just being on reality TV. She was an important part of many great Alaskan moments. The Last Wild Place. Jane was always true to herself, whether she was throwing her line for fish or standing her ground during family arguments. Because she was strong, funny, and caring, she was the person you'd want with you if you got lost in the Alaskan desert. She became a lighthouse for watchers who were struggling with the difficulties of living on a homestead. Jane wasn't born into the famous Kilcher family, but as soon as she joined, she grew up near the Kilcher house in the cute town of Homer, Alaska. While most of her family members were farmers or hunters, she became a great fisherwoman. Growing up near the coast gave her skills that no one else had. She was good at catching fish when no one else could, and she showed that skill on the show. Jane often took the lead in getting the family fresh fish, which was very important in the harsh Alaskan yonder. It was amazing to watch her catch big fish or skillfully move through icy water. That being said, Jane did more than just fish. She brought much-needed balance to the Kilcher men, who were often very serious and silent. Her quick wit and sense of humor made things more fun, and people loved it when she teased others or told jokes during stressful times. She had a special way of connecting with the audience on a personal level, and she wasn't afraid to show her weak side by saying out loud when she was scared or overwhelmed, which isn't always easy to do in Alaska. Jane was also a link between modern life and the way of life in Kilcher. She brought a new point of view to the show because she had lived away from the farm for some of her life. She fully adopted this way of life, even though she wasn't born into it. This shows that you don't need generations of homesteading knowledge to do well in the woods. Fans like Jane because she could relate to them, but her journey hasn't been all smooth sailing. Her road has been full of both sunny days and storms, just like Alaska's weather. Jane's life away from the cameras often seemed just as dramatic as what was shown on TV, with rumors about family fights and deep personal problems. Over time, she became more guarded of her private life. She often complained about being seen as only Addie, Lee's wife, or the fisherwoman, because she thought there was more to her story. She is a fiercely independent woman when she's not on TV, a mother who loves her daughter Piper very much and values her privacy, even though she is famous. Before you knew it, her shocking split from Lee in 2003 changed her story in a way that no one saw coming. How did Jane go from being a well-liked person on the Alaskan frontier to going through some of the hardest times of her life in public? Because of her job, Jane faces problems. There's more to it than just living the dream on a reality TV show. Like the stories of many small-screen stars, Jane's took unexpected turns. Some were nice, while others were hard right from the start. Jane became well known on Alaska, the last frontier. But as the show got more popular, so did attention on her personal life, which caused problems. At first, Jane was okay with being portrayed as a fisherwoman. It correctly showed how good she was at fishing. But as time went on, she started to feel limited. Jane could do a lot more than just fish well. She was an independent person with many sides. Sadly, the show didn't always show these different sides of her, which made her character seem flat and put the Kilcher men and the homestead story in the background. Jane wasn't just known for her fishing. As a mother and wife, she had a lot more to say than what was shown. She has been very open about how unhappy she is with how she is being portrayed. The idea of the stereotypical fisherwoman stuck with Jane, and she found it annoying. She thought that the way the show edited her didn't really show who she was, because it left out her struggles, hard decisions, and personal growth that happened away from the public. But even though she was more than just a fisherwoman, that's what most people thought of her. So, let's look at how Jane Kilcher's character got lost in the mix on Alaska, the last frontier. This was mostly because of how the family worked and how the show tended to focus on some people more than others. There are as many different kinds of Kilchers in the family as there are people in Alaska. Kilcher is the head of the family. He is a tough, wise man who has been through a lot. His son, Kilcher, is not at all like him. He likes to try new things, is rebellious, and is always looking for fun. He loves the land very much, though. It looked like Lee's wife, Jane, would be a great balance to the serious and rough Kilcher guys at first. A strong, skilled, and stable person, she was a beloved member of the family. But as time went on, she played a different part in the family and on the show. Jane was good at many things, but she was often in the background of the show. It wasn't about the women in the Kilcher family in Alaska, the last frontier. It was mostly about the tough, rough guys who went to Alaska and survived the harsh conditions there. Lee were always in the news because they were meeting challenges, making it through the wilderness, and pushing themselves to their limits. The problems they were having were what made the show exciting, so they were the main focus. Jane, on the other hand, rarely played a main part. The men were shown dealing with bad weather and doing dangerous jobs. But Jane's efforts were not always given enough attention. People rarely paid the same amount of attention to her skills and problems. Instead, she was often just called the fisherwoman, which limited her role to one part of life and didn't show off all of her skills. This was also helped by the way the show was cut together. It was clear how hard things were for the guys and how much they had accomplished. It made their experiences seem bigger than life. Jane's problems and wins, on the other hand, were often seen as less. During the show, though, Lee didn't seem to be as interested in Jane's story as he could have been. His inner problems, dangerous adventures, and emotional fights often took center stage, leaving Jane's journey in the background. While people watched Lee deal with grizzly bears, find his way through the woods, and face his past, Jane was quietly keeping everything together. She wasn't just a wife, she was also a mother, a homesteader, and a member of the family that was very important to their survival. But the show didn't show how strong she was in a quiet way very often. While Lee was out facing his fears or taking on dangerous challenges, Jane was at home taking care of the house, making sure the family's needs were met, and helping in ways that were often not noted. She was very important in making sure everything ran smoothly. However, Her problems didn't get as much attention because they weren't as exciting or striking. The show's editing clearly preferred the Kilcher men's larger-than-life personalities, bringing out the depth of their emotional journeys. It was interesting to see how Lee and his father, Kilcher, fought, but Jane's stories were sometimes overlooked. She was there. She was important. It wasn't always clear that she earned the praise she got, though. However, Jane did have her own times when she shone. It was impossible to ignore her, and she was a strong person in her own right. It wasn't her fault. It was because the show didn't always give her enough time on air or the credit she earned. Even though she made important accomplishments, she was often shown as a supporting character in the Kilcher men's story. Rumors about problems in the family. There were rumors that there were problems in the family that got worse over time. The Kilchers seemed like a close-knit family at first glance, but behind the scenes, rumors spread of fights and relationships that were getting tense. There were rumors that Jane was having problems with some family members, which added to the drama that was already going on around the show. Because they lived in public, every little thing could be made bigger than it really was. Soon, news stories started to say that things were not as peaceful as they seemed. There were reports that Jane had problems with some of her Kilcher cousins. This added to the story of family drama in Alaska, the last frontier. But here's the shocking turn of events. Though there was a lot of talk and gossip, Jane stayed strong. Even though everyone was still talking about the Kilcher guys and their problems, she kept showing how valuable she was in quieter, more consistent ways. People who paid attention knew that Jane was very important for keeping everything together, even if she wasn't always the center of attention, even though she wasn't getting as much. Even though the show didn't always tell her whole story, there was a woman named Jane who was there. She laughed with her kids, loved her family very much, and had problems that were never shown on TV. The first complaint she got started to change over time. Fans began to understand that reality TV usually only shows a small part of a person's life and leaves out the most important parts. At first, people didn't like how Alaska, the last frontier, portrayed Jane. But then, they started to root for the real Jane, who was more than just a supporting figure on someone else's journey. Jane kept her head held high through all of it. Even though her job on the show made her angry at times, she found a way to deal with them. What's more, she built a life away from the cameras. A life that wasn't shaped by edits, stereotypes, or what people expect from reality TV. She wouldn't let how people saw her define who she was. She didn't let what other people thought of her stop her. Instead, it inspired her. She stayed true to herself and showed fans a side of her that had never been fully shown on TV or film. Even though the show had rules, she didn't let them stop her. That's not what she did. Instead, she used them to fuel her own path and show that she was more than just Jane the fisherwoman. In the beginning, Jane was only known as the woman who fished in Alaska, which was the last frontier. She changed into something much better over time. She was seen as a strong woman who wouldn't let herself be mistreated and fought to be seen for who she really was. Her trip wasn't just about staying alive in the woods. She had to stand up for herself, getting away from how other people wanted to describe her and showing that there are different ways to be strong. But her true strength was put to the test when Lee's almost fatal accident came up out of the blue and destroyed everything she held dear. People had seen this man repeatedly surviving Alaska's harsh conditions by pushing himself to the limit and taking on nature's hardest challenges. All of a sudden, he was in a real-life fight for survival. Everything changed in an instant, and no one saw that test of strength coming. Lee had always been known for being brave and interested in new experiences. But this time, he wasn't just fighting in the wild, he was fighting for his life. As they dealt with the problems that came with being in the public eye, Lee had a scary accident while hiking with a friend in 2015 that changed everything. He really hurt himself when he fell off a cliff, a very bad fall that broke several bones in his body. He broke his arm, leg, lungs, and maybe even something else when he hit the ground. It wasn't just a small,